Welcome to The Code, your guide to health and human performance. I'm your host, Dr. Andrew Fix from Physio Room, a performance-based rehab facility here in Denver. On this podcast, we're going to explore the key areas of your life that impact your overall health and wellness, from sleep hygiene and stress management to nutrition, movement, relationships, and more. We bring you conversations with industry experts and top performers to share strategies they have for cracking the code on health and human performance. Now let's get to today's show. All right, on this episode, we're talking to Dr. Chris Robl, CEO and owner of Physio Room, a performance rehab practice in the South Denver area. Welcome to the show, Chris. Thanks for being on here.
Thanks, Andrew. Excited to chat with you a little bit more today.
Yeah, and I know, for those of you guys that are listening, Chris is potentially going to be a host on this podcast as well. So you may hear some episodes where he's the one on here talking. But today, what we're going to do is we're going to interview Chris and talk a little bit about his background, where Physio Room came from, and where Physio Room, the practice, is going in the future. So Chris, why don't we just start there and share with the listeners a little bit about just like your background that led you to where you are right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I always start out the story telling everybody that I'm a son and grandson of a couple of wheat farmers from middle of nowhere, Kansas. And, I'm allergic to wheat dust, so that's not going to bode very well, taking over the family farm. So growing up, I was introduced to the sport of motocross. So I raced dirt bikes for about 10, 11 years and had 23 broken bones and 8 major surgeries. Yeah, definitely one of those things where you're good enough to push the envelope. And as you continue to push the envelope, on dirt bikes, you're going to find the ground. So unfortunately, I have been to the physical therapist more times than I care to admit. So yeah, when you show up to college, that's where I'm not going to be the farmer. So I'm going to be the PT, and the rest is history there. So that's how I ended up here.
Man, it seems like that story, someone who's a physical therapist now, or any type of, medical person for that matter, there is very often a history of you've been through something, your own injuries, your broken bones, your surgeries, and that kind of leads you down this path. I have had a similar thing where I didn't have 23 broken bones, but I've had my own share of injuries and surgeries. And like you said, it sounds like you were pushing the envelope, and that's kind of what this whole show is designed to be, right? Is we're going to talk to other people who are pushing the envelope in whatever their domain is, whether that's in business or in their own fitness journey or anything else. So you said you've had physical therapy a lot as a patient. When you were in there as a client, do you think that's what, did you think about that at the time? How old were you the first time you went to physical therapy? And did you even think that you were going to become a physical therapist one day, having been in there?
I think I was misguided. I showed up to PT, and the physical therapist, he had a daughter that was my age, and I had a crush on her. And he would always be like, no, I can't schedule this time or that time. I'm going to Paige's, basketball game. And I thought, wow, this guy's got a BMW in the parking lot. He gets to write his own schedule. Being a physical therapist is going to be amazing. I think that's what I'm going to do. So it definitely was it planted my first seed for sure. Mm-hmm. Little did I know that was just all a facade.
All right. So of course we're sitting in Colorado now. You said you're from Kansas. So what was that transition like, or when did you decide, hey, I'm going to move to Colorado? Because you didn't say this on the show, I don't think, but I know you went to physical therapy school and undergrad in Kansas. So how did you wind up here in Colorado?
Yeah, so growing up in Kansas, you're either a K-State football fan or a KU basketball fan, and I leaned more towards KU at that time. So went to KU and graduated there in 2008. Got to see them win that national championship in 2008 and the Orange Bowl, so Rock Chalk. And then moved over to Kansas City, went to Rockhurst University, and graduated with my doctorate there in 2011. And that's when I started to look towards Colorado. I started dating my wife at the time. We were doing the long distance thing, and I said, I'm going to move out to Colorado and if the girl doesn't work out, the mountains are cool. But thankfully, 7 years of marriage and 3 kids later, the girl worked out.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And you guys, I've met Chris's kids. He has an adorable family, and and Courtney has been a huge help, I think, to not only raising the family, but even helping to get Physio Room off the ground. So, okay, so you moved here to Colorado. What was like your first job like that you took in the field of physical therapy, and where was that?
Yeah, so Colorado, the PT job market here is very challenging because a lot of physical therapists want to move here. So ironically enough, I found my first job on Craigslist, and I worked there for 6 months. And because the job market is so saturated, you didn't make the money that you wanted to make. And I decided, well, I'll look elsewhere. And I'd gotten an offer down in Roswell, New Mexico, because nobody wants to live there. And I came back, and the group that I was with at the time, they counter offered and they said, no, don't go. And so I was able to buy into a practice 6 months after graduating and learn how to become an owner, director, and physical therapist all at the same time. And so I had a very steep learning curve, and it was great. I learned so much with that group. And maybe most importantly, I learned a ton about leadership. The guy that owned that was a former Marine, and he was brilliant. And I learned a lot about what to do, but I think even more so, I learned what not to do. And it came down to some of the relationships that we had. And I definitely learned that was really important to me. And so for me, I think that is where Physio Room was kind of born, and focused on the relationship.
Yeah. I've got to say, Chris, I don't think I even know where Roswell, New Mexico is. I could not point that out on a map. I could point out New Mexico, but definitely not place any of the cities in there if I didn't know where they were. Okay, so you said you learned, most importantly, what not to do in that previous job. And I think we all have had previous jobs where, whether you're there still or not, you learned a lot of things from that experience. And, learning what not to do kind of reminds me of like, you don't know what you don't know at the time. So you started Physio Room, or you left that place, you decided to go out on your own and start the practice named Physio Room. Take us through that transition. Like when did Physio Room start? Why, more importantly, why did you decide to start Physio Room? You said relationships really important, but like, how did that come to fruition?
Yeah, I think towards the end of my time there at the previous place, we started going more in towards a corporate model where my treatment time started to get shortened down, and we started to really increase the volume. So it became way more quantity based as opposed to quality based type of care. And I just started feeling the fire and the passion that I had for the profession start to dwindle, and I just didn't like where we were going. So I had the opportunity to sell in 2016. I sold, and then waited out my 2-year non-compete, and then officially launched Physio Room October 1st of 2018. And that's where we very first started here in Highlands Ranch, just out of a CrossFit gym, backcountry CrossFit. And so we'll forever be grateful for that opportunity with that gym.
Yeah. And, I sort of got connected to you through my sister-in-law and through some running athletes and coaches out here in Colorado. And I believe it was the end of May of 2020 when I joined. But so you decided to start Physio Room a couple years, 2016, but it officially started under that name October of 2018. And at that time, it was just you, right? Like you're the only person, one-man show.
Yeah, it was just me. And, we were treating a bunch of athletes, and I'm a golfing athlete, a competitive cyclist. And I just was trying to get more into this fitness mindset, and just trying to push myself and trying to see what I could do from a physical therapy point of view to help other athletes like that. So I knew for a fact that I was going to do hour-long sessions, and I wanted to focus on the quality and not the quantity of treatments. And I wanted to be able to give those athletes the things that were missing in my own program. So that's kind of how we started. It was just me, and then I was able to hire a young lady, Megan, who has now worked her way up as our operations officer. And we just started growing slowly, and just starting to work with runners and CrossFitters in the area. And that's where I ended up meeting a running coach here in town, and he referred what is now your sister-in-law. And so was able to work with some high-level runners in the area, and starting to gain some traction in that niche.
Yeah, and we probably won't have time on this show to go through like the entire team here as part of Physio Room. But, now our practice has 14 employees. We have multiple locations. Did you ever envision at the time, October 2018, or even right when you hired Megan, a little bit into that Physio Room was going to turn from like your own single person treating in a CrossFit gym clinic to having multiple locations, having multiple employees, and having the team that we have now? Did you even think that was possible?
I was told multiple times, in fact, it was not possible. And I was totally fine with that. I was just going to be a one-man band, and we were just going to have fun and enjoy the profession again. But I think it was that mentality of just like, let's get down and let's not be the right PT for everybody, but let's be very specific. And working with the CrossFitters and the cyclists and the golfers, that was kind of my niche. And I had gotten really good at being very pointy with that niche. And so that's the only reason that I do feel like we've grown, is now we hire these folks, and you don't really get to work for Physio Room unless you've got a specific niche. You are the expert authority, almost even like a celebrity in that niche. We've got a sports chiropractor, and Dr. James went to the CrossFit Games, and that's his niche. He's a sports chiropractic, doctor for CrossFitters that want to get better at CrossFit. And so when they're talking specifically about, how they get an impingement in the shoulder with their snatch, that's where it comes from. And he can speak intelligently, and they can connect. And so again, I think it just comes back to that connection and those little moments. It always comes down to the little details and the little moments of making sure that, you feel heard, and that you feel valued, and that this guy gets it, and that you trust 100% that you're in the right place. And I think that's allowed us to not only be, raving fans of our clients, but then for them to get the results that they're looking for, and for them to come full circle and become our biggest fans. And then they're referring to us. And you only get there by really going all in and understanding who it is that you're serving, and building that trust with those relationships.
Yeah, you're 100% right. And I mean, being one of the providers of Physio Room, that is totally what we see, is like our clients are really the the fuel that makes this thing run. Like, they're the ones that are going out and supporting us in the community, sending their friends and family over to us. But like you said, we wouldn't really get to this point if there wasn't this like feeling of, I have to go all in on this. So it sounds like there was potentially a lot of risk of deciding to leave the place you were at, where you probably were comfortable, to come out and decide to start your own thing. Like, were you really worried about that at the time, the risk that you were taking to start Physio Room?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I didn't know where my next client was going to come from. I didn't even know if I would have another client. And so for the first year, it was very scary. But you just kept doing what you were passionate about and enjoyed. And my wife was very supportive, and I was like, I'll give it a year, and if it doesn't work, then I'll go get another job. What's there to lose? There was no real risk. I would have regretted not going all in more than not taking the opportunity. So that was my mentality going in.
Yeah, and you actually just kind of answered my next question there. I was going to basically ask you, like, if you, being where you're at now, do you have any regrets of, what happened? And you just said, no, I would have regretted if I didn't take this opportunity. So I would be willing to bet if I would have asked you this question, and I don't think in the 2 years that I've known you that I have asked you this question, but your answer probably is different now than it would have been before. What would you say, Chris, is has been for you the biggest challenge in starting Physio Room and then it growing from being like just you to starting to hire other employees and having an office manager and having other providers? Like, what's been the biggest challenge along the way, starting this practice?
I would 100% say it is my biggest challenge has been personal growth. Without personal growth, I don't get to become a leader, and I don't get the self-reflection and that self-awareness that's absolutely necessary in order to lead a team.
Yeah.
If you don't know who you are as a person, then it's going to be very hard to set clarity and vision for your team.
Mm-hmm.
And without the clarity and that vision, your team is not going to have the buy-in, and they're not going to give you 100% of their effort without that clarity. So it's all about setting clarity and expectations, and you have to set that for yourself. Why am I doing this? Why do I work? And for me, I'm a student, and I think that's what I look for in new hires and new team members. Is you got to be passionate about continuously learning and improving and having that growth mindset. And so right now, I think my biggest challenge is learning how to be this voracious, educator and teacher, so that I can instill that core value of being a voracious, student and learner. Because I think no matter if you're a CEO or a brand new PT, the hunger for learning and improving has to be there. And so if you're an athlete, you should be learning better nutrition and how do you program better, and how do you reflect and become more self-aware of like, hey, you know what, today's not the day. I'm not going to push. It's a recovery day. And learning those little nuances is what sets you apart from being just a standard, business or a standard athlete. That's probably been my biggest challenge and growth over the last 3 years.
Yeah. And that makes sense because, the business is only going to go as far as you go, right? And if you don't have that personal growth, well, then that's going to show or be reflected in the business. And I think that's, true for just about everything. And you guys, if you have not been to physical therapy, or you don't have friends or family that are physical therapists or chiropractors or massage therapists, trainers that we have here on staff, I think one common theme that is true for most people is we're really just all a bunch of big nerds. We love to learn. Like, I've never been to one of these like weekend continuing education courses where the room is just not filled with people who are excited to learn whatever the new techniques are or the new things that are going on at that course. But sometimes when you get in the day-to-day grind and the hustle and bustle of life and work and family activities, and you have children and you have a house, sometimes that stuff kind of gets lost. But yeah, I think when in the context of work, everybody loves to learn, but then making that transition from you being the learner to then trying to learn different things so that you can educate on the back end to other people. That's a hard transition. So then what's next? So you mentioned clarity and vision are important, because if you don't know who you are and where you're going, well, then you don't know how you're going to get there. You're not going to have a path to get there. So you said before, you didn't at the time envision Physio Room turning into what Physio Room is right now. A couple locations in South Denver, 14 employees. So what's next? Like, what is the plan for, what do you picture now Physio Room turning into?
Yeah, I want to be a premier orthopedic sports performance rehab facility. And so, obviously we already have physical therapy, chiropractic, massage, personal training, but I really want to kind of dive into that biometric and trying to do these assessments for these teams and helping athletes learn where they're deficient in movement, because that's again our biggest point is movement is medicine. And if we can teach these kids from a very young mindset of how to properly move, and they can continue to build and develop over the years, we're going to see significantly fewer injuries, and more importantly, we're going to see significantly better athletes performing sport. And that's the fun thing. I think as I've gotten older, I've lost like main interest in the NFL and the NBA. I'm just a fan of people developing a skill set, and I'm just a fan of people performing well in whatever niche they're in. So I think just that's my biggest thing. I want to see these kids excel and reach their goals and go play in college. And so I'd like to be a facility that helps not only rehab these injuries, but also add into some of that performance mindset. So there's a lot of growth over the next few years, but right now it's just sticking to the fundamentals, and I think that's the important part.
Yeah, and as you were talking there, Chris, what I was just jotting down a couple notes, and the two things that I wrote down were the words prevention and fundamentals, because what it sounded like you were saying in that answer was you would like to see sort of the shift go from catching youth athletes or kids at an early age and making sure we teach them how to move early on in order to prevent a lot of these common injuries and ailments that we see. And then you ended up saying the word fundamentals as we were going there. And I think that is totally true, because and you'll probably hear me say this again at some point in the future, but in talking shop with some friends and colleagues, I think back to some of the strength training and things that I was doing in high school and in college when I was playing football. And I remember as a football athlete, we used to do a lot of the exercise hang cleans. But as I think back on that in high school, we're doing hang cleans. I don't ever remember being how to properly perform a deadlift, but we were doing hang cleans. And of course, if you've ever done hang cleans before, of course, you have to pick the barbell up first off the ground. So you have to know how to do a deadlift before you can do a hang clean. And that's one of those fundamental things that I think was sort of glossed over or skipped over, because we were thinking about like, we want to produce power, we got to do these hang cleans. It's an appropriate exercise for football players, but you got to learn how to deadlift first. You've got to master the fundamentals and the basics before you can move on to the other stuff. And that's probably true of business too.
Absolutely.
Right. Like I would imagine you found that in running the business is you've got to figure out the basics and the fundamentals before you can start worrying about all the other shiny object type of things.
Absolutely. Yeah, I definitely think that we've got a very unique process in this, in the idea of, we like to say that we hit the reset button and then we restore normal movement patterns and then we reload them. And I think that's where fundamentally, if you have an ACL tear and you're not getting back to these deadlifts and you're not teaching these kids how to actually get stronger, I mean, legitimately making physiological changes to get stronger, there's going to be another re-tear. And we see that time and time again. How many ACL tears have a second one? And that's because historically, physical therapists are terrible at loading people up appropriately. And there's this huge gap between, all right, you're done with PT and you can go up and down the stairs normally, and 9 months later, you're going to go back to sport. And there are a lot of great strength coaches out there, but as a profession, I think physical therapists and performance rehab professionals can do so much better. And that's where we're trying to go here, is continuing to educate folks on why strength matters and why that is so fundamental in not only performing better on the field, but at 85 years old, if you're lifting up a laundry basket and that's the heaviest thing you can do, well, then you just did a 1 rep max. And as any athlete knows, if you're lifting your 1 rep max every single day, that's a recipe for disaster. And so we're trying to educate not only our youth, but some of our older clients on why getting stronger is so important. And that's going to help them maintain better balance, decrease risk of falls, and all of that. So from the whole gamut, it always comes back to the fundamentals, and strength is a key component of that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't think I could sum it up any better than basically what you just did. And that's pretty much that gray area that you spoke of, that gap from where physical therapy ends and performance training begins, that gray area that's in the middle. I think that's one of the reasons that, when I got connected with you, I wanted to know, how can I join Physio Room? Because I was starting to find myself teetering with that gap and struggling with the employment world that I was in before, of like, how do I, in my current job, help people in this gray area? And I was struggling to find a way to do that. And so I just started to go out on my own and started doing, like, I had clients in the clinic who pretty much, they finished, quote, physical therapy. They didn't have pain anymore, but they weren't really back to like excelling in life. They were just back to their normal stuff. They were able to load the dishwasher and they were able to take care of their kids, but they weren't really like doing recreation at the level that they wanted to do it. But I was unable to get like approval, from their insurance to continue physical therapy. So what really sparked my, my planning to like go out and do like personal training on my own outside of the office was I had a client's wife send me an email, or actually I think it was a voicemail. She called me and left me a voicemail and basically asked, like, how much would it cost for her husband to keep working with me to get stronger and to do some of these things that he wanted to do. And I had never even really thought about it before. So I just like made up a number like that I thought was fair, ran it by her. She said, great, I would like to schedule him for 2 sessions a week of 3 months of personal training with you. And she wrote me a check for that amount. And that's pretty much, what sparked me like wanting to come join Physio Room. Is I was like, this is that gray area that I want to be in. And I hadn't found a way to do it before. Well, now we did. So I think a lot of people get stuck in that mind, or not mindset, but like stuck in that trap, so to speak, of like, they know they want to do something else, but they just don't quite know how to do it or what step to take to get to that area where they think the grass is greener.
Yeah. Yeah. And for me, I think I'm a very competitive person. So when you say that, you're always looking towards somebody that's doing it and maybe looking at somebody that's doing it better than what you're doing. And that's where business coaching comes in. I've spent almost my entire undergrad education money. I've spent post PT on business education. So I'm continuously investing in this and just trying to challenge the status quo and be better, because we all know that healthcare is broken. The insurance companies continue to lower our reimbursements, and that forces these PT companies to then see multiple people at the same time. And that's where I left, and that's where you left, because you just couldn't provide the care. And I think that's the thing. Our PTs probably aren't any better than the PTs over at the local, mill clinic down the street. But what our PTs have is the availability to provide the time that you can't get anywhere else. And so that's the thing that kind of differentiates us, is we're able to spend that time with the clients and learn what their goals are. And that's going to help us get them back to, skiing or setting the FKT on a couple 14ers here in town. FKTs are the fastest known times. And so, yeah, I think that's the important part. And so whether you're a business owner, a PT, or an athlete, you're always looking at somebody and trying to emulate them. Like, what's that runner doing? What are they eating? How often are they eating? What does their cadence look like during their long runs versus their sprint work? And I think that those little nuances and talking about that is what you can't get elsewhere.
Yeah, you're totally right. And, I have conversations with people here in the clinic, our other staff members and team members. I have conversations with clients who have been to care, physical therapy or chiropractic or anything else at other places. And that's the story that continues to get shared, is it's just different. I agree with you that there are phenomenal providers at all sorts of different places. They're just not in the same situation. The person is phenomenal. Their skills are phenomenal. They're probably an amazing therapist, but when your time is pinched so thin, it's hard to give the quality to every single person and then know that, oh, you're going to have to go home and type notes for an hour and a half because you didn't quite finish them during the day. And then, that's going to empty your cup on the out of work things, the family time and your own fitness routine or whatever you want to do to take care of yourself. So thanks for giving a background on, where you came from, where Physio Room came from, where Physio Room might be going in the future, because who knows what the future holds. But what I want to do before we start to wrap this up is I'm going to ask this question to everybody that comes on the podcast, and take a second to answer it, because you didn't know that this question was coming. But in this conversation that we just had, what is one question that you wish that I would have asked you that I didn't ask? And what's the answer to that question?
What's one question that you didn't ask? Well, I would probably say, who is one of the most inspirational businesses or athletes in the area? And we have so many, and I've worked with a ton of amazing people. A couple come to mind right now. First, a young lady, Becky Bauer, she ran a 250-mile race. And just the mental toughness and the fortitude that you have to have just to even sign up for that is incredible.
I can't imagine that, for the record.
No.
The longest I've ever run is 15 miles. I can't imagine running 250 or more.
That's almost 10 marathons back to back to back.
Back to back to back.
Unbelievable. And then I'll give you three, because it's really hard. I love what Tristan Mitchell is doing over at Lion's Den, and his passion and enthusiasm is absolutely contagious when you talk about performance and running. And then I tell you, V23 over there in Centennial has caught fire, and they've got some really cool things happening. And I would love to learn how Bo is creating a culture that he is, because it is that culture that we have here at Physio Room that I think has allowed us to excel. And it's the intangibles. And I can't tell you how or why the culture has progressed like it has, but it's phenomenal. And I just kind of tie that back. If you want to go fast, you go alone. And if you want to go far, you go together. And that is the culture that we strive for every single day here at Physio Room. And that's the reason that we're in this group. We're a pack of clinicians trying to change healthcare as we know it. And I hope that we inspire other clinicians to do the same. And I hope that we inspire more athletes to continue to challenge the status quo and push the limits and push that envelope. Know that you're going to hit the ground every now and then, but it's just a bump in the road, and that you do have a team backing you and supporting you. So continue to chase your dreams and don't have any regrets.
Yeah, we sort of started the conversation talking about pushing the envelope, 23 broken bones, 8 surgeries, and then you just ended it about having people continue to push the envelope. And when you're doing that, there's going to be bumps along the way. You're going to fail sometimes. That's okay, as long as you've got that support system around you. you'll be able to get picked back up and continue on your path. Those three people that you mentioned, Becky, Tristan, and Bo, sounds like we need to get them on the show. And we were actually already planning to do that. So stay tuned for some episodes where we're talking to those folks about their own journey and their own business. But wrapping up Physio Room, if people want to get in contact with you or with the team here, Chris, online, where can people find Physio Room?
Yeah, so online we're physioroomco.com, and that is the same for all of our social channels. We're on Instagram and Facebook, so at Physio Room Co. So Physio Room Co. And then if you have questions about the facility, we'd love to answer those. You can send an email to info@physioroomco.com. And if you'd like to reach out to me personally, it's just my first name. So it's chris@physioroomco.com.
Awesome. Well, again, Chris, I appreciate your time. I know your time's valuable. My time's valuable. We're going to jump into some meetings and get back to our team here. But I want to thank you guys for listening to this episode. Stay tuned for more as we talk to more people who are pushing the envelope and just trying to better themselves every single day here on The Code. Thanks so much.